Anybody that knows me, I used to be, very heavy, almost 300 pounds. Like the time I got on the scale, it said 296 pounds. And, I finally said enough is enough. I know the scale was higher at one point. That's like the time that I could break myself to get onto it. And so I've tried just about every diet, every kind of quick fix, and, 2 shakes and a salad. And I've done the keto, I've done pretty much everything, and I've kind of found my path and what works best for me now.
I mean, most of the research is going to show that there's no ill effects from any type of the artificial sweeteners unless it's consumed in just insane doses. So a lot of the literature that I've read or that I followed, if you follow like Layton Norton or any of those guys, they go through a lot of this research. It's mostly done in rodents, and it's done in like 1,000 times the amount that people would consume. So there's really no ill effects from it. It's a great tool for if you need something sweet, if you like pop, go with the diet version. It's obviously going to save you on the caloric side. So I think it's a great tool with food in general.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Duce Raymond Podcast. Today we're going a little off script, and usually we're talking about restaurants or barbecue or marketing or something, but today we're going to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, and that's the health and fitness space. And we have a good friend of mine, Joe Moca, on the call today. So Joe, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm doing very good. So Joe and I have a little bit of history actually through his dad and my uncle. Uncle Dave knew Joe's dad, Angelo, growing up, and Angelo helped Dave a number of times with some injuries and just kind of getting healthy at one time. And Angelo is actually, I worked with Angelo a couple times. He helped me out when I had like foot problems and stuff like that. And then I got introduced to Joe. I don't know how we actually met, if it was through Instagram or your dad introduced us or what, but I know you've helped me out a few times over the years, and really appreciate that relationship. What I was really inspired by recently on your post is all the stuff you do with mobility work and stuff like that. And it just seems like it's so good, but most people do not take the time to do that. But first, I wanted to get into some of your background, your education in the space, and just how you got started in the health and fitness industry.
Yeah, so I mean, going back to when I was in college, I kind of jumped around a couple majors, but I ultimately landed on exercise science, so kinesiology, stuff like that. Got my bachelor's in that, and when I was getting out of school, unfortunately I had a major injury. When I got out of school, I tore my Achilles tendon. So I wasn't able to do much, but it was actually my dad who gave me the idea to just start applying to something in the exercise related area. So I went over to a couple corporate gyms, and honestly, at first I actually applied for just like a front desk position, just trying to get something going. I submitted my resume, and I got a call from Export Fitness, and they're like, "Well, we see this degree on your resume. Why don't you come in and interview to be a trainer?" So that's kind of how I got into it. I was always an athlete and stuff, but I wasn't really fully into like lifting and all that kind of stuff throughout high school and college.
What sports did you play in high school and college?
So in high school, I did volleyball and soccer.
Okay.
I didn't really play anything in college. I just did some intramural stuff. Just kind of jumped around, basketball, volleyball, some different things.
And then how did you build up the cojones to jump into your own business after working for the corporate gyms for a while?
It kind of got forced on me a little bit. I thought about it for a while. I wasn't really happy at the corporate gym. I was working a ton of hours, a lot of sales pressure at those places, and it just wasn't for me. So when the COVID thing happened and they shut down all the gyms, actually what my company did is they actually laid off all their employees. So I got a formal letter saying that I was laid off from the company, and then I started to really reevaluate some things. And obviously it wasn't the ultimate time to open my own business because nobody knew what was really happening at that time. But I had a couple of good clients. I got put onto the space that I'm in now by someone I had met right when that happened. And I kind of just jumped right into it. My wife was super supportive. My dad was super supportive. He actually helped kind of fund a lot of the equipment that I got here from the start. I had a pretty good schedule going even during COVID, so I felt pretty comfortable about it, and it kind of just went from there.
Why don't you tell people like what your gym specializes? Like, how do you describe your gym if somebody's interested in it? Like, what do you do there? What's your specialty?
So obviously it's a small private space. I got about 1,800 square feet, but and you mentioned the mobility stuff that I've been doing. So I focus on that. Obviously, it's all very client dependent. So whatever their goal is going to be, I have to kind of dictate their program based on what they need. So if I have someone coming in that's got a major shoulder injury or hip injury, or is having some pains and stuff like that, I'm going to start them more on the mobility side to kind of try and alleviate some of those issues before I kind of introduce them into a strength program. So
Mm-hmm.
it's all one-on-one. I mean, I do offer a group class called Kin Stretch, which is a
Mm-hmm.
mobility-based class. I do that once a week. Um, but for the most part, it's mainly strength training type stuff. But again, it's all
Okay.
very client dependent on what their goal is and everything else, and kind of where they're starting from.
Why is mobility so important? Like, what's your thought process around that, and what are the benefits to doing that type of exercise?
So, I mean, and we could just go into, I mean, you're listening to a lot of podcasts now. So, how much have you heard about, training the lengthened range or the stretch position of a muscle? Pretty important.
Well, like, right. When you're like, even when you're weight training, like a lot of the growth can happen when that muscle's stretched all the way, correct?
Exactly. So, if you have, let's say, a shoulder issue and you're unable to get, let's say, just say in the chest, for example, if I need to get a chest fly and I need to get to that stretch position here, if I have a shoulder problem that's only allowing this much range, I can't get
Mm-hmm.
that chest to truly stretch. So focusing on the joint and kind of the internal tissue here is going to be more important to get into that range of motion so that eventually you can train that muscle to full length. So that's
I
one
see.
major reason. Obviously, if you're coming in and
Mm-hmm.
you have knee issues, knee pain, back pain, um, it's working on alleviating that stuff. So it's kind of hard to work out when you're in a lot of pain.
Yeah.
So
I
that's where
mean,
a
do
lot
you
of that
find a
comes
lot
from.
of guys too that are just like feel like stiff? And I mean, I think that would be my. I look at some of the stuff you do, especially for the hips, and I feel like, man, if I could do that, like bend that much, I would just feel so much more mobile.
Yeah, and that's a big part of it. And obviously, there is a lot of stiffness stuff that people have, and you're usually that's a neurological response to something. So usually, like people get a lot of tightness in their hip flexors. So a lot of the reason
Mm-hmm.
for that is weakness in that area. So trying to train that hip tissue is going to be more important. And when you're doing, let's say, lunges or squats or something like that, depending on the range of motion you're using, you might not actually get to use that active tissue there because you might be compensating somewhere else, depending on how much range of motion you actually have in your hip. So a lot of that tightness is just
Um.
saying it's not ready to do that.
Right. So like I'm so interested in all this stuff. So I'm gonna go through some of my questions and we can go off on different tangents. But anybody that knows me, I used to be, very heavy, almost 300 pounds. Like the time I got on the scale, it said 296 pounds. And, I finally said enough is enough. I know the scale was higher at one point. That's like the time that I could break myself to get onto it. And so I've tried just about every diet, every kind of quick fix, and two shakes and a salad. And I've done the keto. I've done pretty much everything, and I've kind of found my path and what works best for me now. But I was wondering, based on your experience and working with so many clients from the diet side, what do you see? There's so much to go over in this part of the conversation, but like, what do you see that works best, and how do you try to structure diets for people that really want to get started and just starting to lose fat? That's the biggest thing people want to know is how do I maintain my muscle and how do I lose fat?
Yeah, I mean the number one is always adherence. So when I'm trying to, and I'm not giving out like full diet plans most of the time to clients, but it
Mm-hmm.
really just depends on their schedule, dietary restrictions, and all these different types of things. What can they stick to, and what helps them kind of prepare their food to make it work within their lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like intermittent fasting is really popular right now. So some people just
Mm-hmm.
aren't hungry in the morning, or they have a hard time kind of managing their calories when they're eating throughout a larger window of time. So
Mm-hmm.
intermittent fasting can be beneficial. Ketos works for a lot of people. They tend to just strip their carbs down a ton and they eat a lot more fats and, proteins obviously in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
It really just depends on what can they stick to. So now in my experience, I think keto personally is a very hard diet to follow,
Mm,
especially if you go grab stuff. Because most of the time when you're going to certain places, everything's going to be very carb heavy at most of these restaurants and stuff. So it's kind of hard to prepare something or pick something out that's going to kind of work with that diet. And then, a lot of the time, like I just had a client just now that's a nurse. So she's going, a 12-hour shift and she doesn't get much time to eat. So we got to try and structure her calories and everything around that 12-hour work schedule and try and make it fit in with there. So the biggest thing is really what you can stick to. Obviously, if you're trying to lose weight, you need to be in a caloric deficit. That's the most consistent thing you'll see across all diets and why they're successful.
right.
And obviously, protein is the main marker that everyone
Explain the
tends to.
protein. Why? Because I think like the general public doesn't understand the importance of protein. First of all, to what you were just saying, I've heard it explained this way. It's everything you just said, but either you have to restrict something. Either you have to restrict your time, you have to restrict one of the macronutrients, or you just generally have to track on how much you're intaking throughout the day. So it's like you're restricting something one way or the other if you want to lose weight or body fat. And people think that there's some sort of magic bullet with the keto diet or intermittent fasting. There's no magic bullet per se. It's restricting your calories in some form or fashion. And some people don't want to hear that, but that's based on my experience, based on a lot of the things I've heard and working with different trainers. That's really what it comes down to. And sometimes that's hard to digest, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it's tough because it's obviously you need a caloric deficit in order to lose weight. But the other thing that I deal with a lot is, and this is common because we're all so busy and people don't pay attention, but a lot of people tend to undereat as well. So then when you have someone starting who wants to lose fat and they think I'm nuts when I tell them this, but sometimes you need to kind of reverse back to kind of a maintenance level to kind of get
Mm-hmm.
everything going again, and then you cut back down after that. So
Mm-hmm.
again, it goes back to specificity on who you're working with. So there's no like one step approach for anybody. Like,
Yeah.
with your schedule might not work with mine, might not work with whoever else. But that's another thing that I've seen a lot. And when you go to the protein side, I'll tell you about 90% of the clients that I have come in here are way under consuming their protein. And the
Yeah.
hard part with that as well is it's the most satiable food, so it's much more filling. So the other thing I get is when I tell people they got to eat X amount of protein, they're like, "But I'm so full." I'm like, "There's a reason
Darn.
for that." I mean, that's a good thing because then you're going to restrict a little more because you're full. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's tough. It's tough to get a lot of protein, and I mean, you're coming from, you're in the food industry and you're working with a lot of meat and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's not my problem, but I know, like for my wife, for instance, she really struggled until recently, really understanding like I got to eat, this much meat, and it's really in her case, she's probably not going to like me say this, but she's 130 pounds. I tell her she needs to get at least like 100 grams of protein a day to, if she wants to focus on maintaining muscle. I mean, in that range anyway. Would you agree with something like that?
Yeah, usually the rule of thumb is like 1.6 grams to 2.3 grams per kilogram of body weight. So if you're going
Mm-hmm.
pounds, it's like zero point 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight to maintain.
Right. Yeah.
And if you're trying to lose weight, typically you'll take in a little bit more protein to try and avoid any muscle loss. So that's even harder because obviously you're bringing the scale up a little bit more on the protein side. But yeah, that's kind of the general rule of thumb for where you want to be protein wise.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty easy. Um, if you think about it, once you start getting into, and someone that doesn't know anything about this space at all, grams per pound and stuff like that is a little bit confusing. But like, if you think about it, if you're 200 pounds, you need to get 200 pounds of protein. Like, that's like the simple way to look at it. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
and that's what I'm trying to do. Fortunately for me, getting in protein is not a problem for me. I like to eat meat and all, low fat Greek yogurt and eggs, and then all the meat, chicken, brisket, all that stuff. So it's easy for me to get in protein, and I know that it's not always easy for other people. It's one thing I got going for me that way.
Yeah, some people just don't like meat that much, so it's hard to. So then you got to find
Right.
some alternatives, and now they got some really high protein yogurts and oatmeals and all this kind of stuff you can buy now. So the
Hmm.
industry is switched around and where they have a lot more options to kind of help you get there.
How do you think about when someone's on a diet and they still want that sweet? What is your opinion on non-nutritive sweeteners like stevia or sucralose or any of those type of either whether it's natural or not? What is your opinion on, is that good for you? Should you be having a Diet Coke or anything like that, or is that a no off limits?
So it's actually a really good alternative to a lot of things. I mean, I'm kind of drinking one right now.
Nice.
There's, I think, sucralose in here, maybe. Yeah, sucralose. I mean, most of the research is going to show that there's no ill effects from any type of the artificial sweeteners unless it's consumed in just insane doses. So a lot of the literature that I've read or that I followed, if you follow like Layne Norton or any of those guys, they go through a lot of this research. It's mostly done in rodents, and it's done in like 1,000 times the amount that people would consume. So there's really
Hmm.
no ill effects from it. It's a great tool for if you need something sweet, if you like pop, go with the diet version. It's obviously going to save you on the caloric side. So I think it's a great tool with food in general. I have like I'm a Diet Coke guy. I usually drink maybe one a day at least. So it
Me
is
too.
what it is. I mean, I'd rather have that than the regular Coke and lose 300 calories that I could eat, protein wise or whatever else. So that's just my thing on it.
Yeah. No, I agree, and it's interesting. I had actually mentioned that to you this earlier, that I listened to that podcast with Andrew Huberman, who's very well known in the space too. He talks about all sorts of stuff, but a lot on health and nutrition. And then Layne Norton, and at one time they were like on opposite sides of the sweetener thing, and they had a podcast together and kind of got on the same page about it, more on what you were saying about how Layne Norton found that actually there isn't any ill effects. A lot of what they were showing was just what you said, based on rodent studies that were just astronomical in the doses that they were giving these animals. Um,
And as you go through
what?
a lot of late stuff, is that he always says like the poison is the dosage.
Mm,
So for most of these things, and I don't know why this kind of got shifted away, but everyone says like everything in moderation used to be a huge saying, and no one really uses that anymore. But it's very true. Like as long as you're not over consuming it in crazy amounts, it's not going to be bad for you.
it's pretty funny that a lot of those things your mom or grandmother would say, make sure you're getting your sleep, drink enough water, everything in moderation. All those things kind of come back to true and trying to stay healthy. And yeah, people don't always listen to what actually makes sense. Um, what do you, when you're starting out working with someone that's just, maybe they're 40 and they're just trying to get back into the swing of things, they want to start taking their diet and health seriously again. What do you do for training? Like, how do you get them started? If they're just are, used to work out when they were a kid and now they haven't done anything for the last 10 years, and where do you start with them?
And usually the first big thing is doing kind of a thorough assessment of kind of where they're at. Um, and you kind of got to base a program on that. So if I've had someone that's really not moving much and they're very unstable and things like that, I might do more cable-based things, machine-based things, because it's going to be a lot more stabilization. I wouldn't throw them into like a barbell squat or a deadlift or something like that, where they're very uncomfortable, very unstable, and have a little higher risk of kind of, I don't want to say injury because it's not technically what's going to happen, but you want to do
Hmm.
what's going to be most beneficial for them. And a lot of it is teaching them about how their body moves and how things are supposed to contract and how to properly work things. So a lot of times, a lot of people don't take the neurological aspect into training, but I mean, how many times you've been working out? You're like, I don't really feel what I think I'm supposed to be feeling. So a lot
Yeah.
of it is just educating them in the beginning. And usually, people that are brand new, they're going to see results fairly quick in the beginning, just because they haven't really been doing anything. But
Hmm.
start very basic, obviously goal oriented, whatever their main goal is going to be. And Honestly, I start most people on cables to start, or some very simple type movements to kind of trying to get them going at first, and then once they start progressing, you can start making things a little bit more advanced.
Let's talk a little bit about the whole muscle building process and how can you tell if you're going in the right direction. You know, a lot of the stuff I listen to, they talk about hypertrophy all the time. It's a word I was not familiar with, and now I understand it a little bit. But can you talk through what hypertrophy is and what is actually going on with the muscle when that's happening?
I mean, it's basically, the growing the size of the muscle or the strength and everything else that comes along with it. And now you're hearing, obviously, like a lot, people used to say hypertrophy range is, do 8 to 12 reps. Pretty good load, 8 to 12 reps, that's your sweet spot. More of the research now is showing that the rep range doesn't really matter. Obviously, don't do like 100 reps. That's not really worth the time. But yeah, I mean, when you're trying to grow muscle, it's basically a lot of it has to come down to eating, just like anything else. So if you want to get bigger, you got to eat more. So that's a big part of it. And then the intensity has to be there. So if you really want to grow the muscle, you got to make sure you're really putting in the effort for it. And obviously, a well-rounded program always comes a long way. So making sure you're hitting different ranges, different angles, different types of tissue in whatever muscle you're trying to work. And that's kind of the blueprint of how you really want to grow certain muscle.
And how much does hypertrophy have to do with like progressive overload?
I mean, that's progressive overload is everything. So and there's different ways. A lot of people think progressive overload simply means just increasing the load. It doesn't necessarily have to just be increasing weight all the time. You can change the resistance profile. You can change the type of weight, the tempo. You can add quarter reps. You can do all these different things to make things more difficult. So that's still progressing it in a different way. But yeah, if you eventually want to get better, obviously you have to challenge yourself more each time.
And that's basically the stimulus of what is going to make your muscles grow. If you do a little bit more over time each time, then that's really I didn't understand that, for a long time, and it makes sense. But if you don't know that type of thing, and that's what, when you get a personal trainer or doing more research, really understand. And you mentioned about rep ranges. So that's always what I thought too, is like, 8 to 12 reps or whatever. That's, you used to hear that. But now people are talking about anywhere from 5 reps to 30 reps. How can that be right? So it's just at 5 reps, you're doing a lot heavier weight, and at 30 reps, it's a lot less, less of a load. Is that the deal there?
Basically, yeah. Yeah, so obviously if you're only doing 5, I mean, you're going to have a pretty heavy load, or else you're going to end up doing a lot more than 5. So it's just, you're just changing the load amounts in each one.
How often are you pushing, like when your clients are training with you and, they're working on growing muscle, are you taking them close to failure, or how do you think about that?
So it depends on the session. I mean, most of the time, I'm not taking them to complete failure. Usually, you want to get to a point where obviously you're struggling, and if you're looking at like reps in reserve, a lot of people talk about RIR, like 2 to 3 reps in reserve. Sometimes I'll use different methods, like I'll use a lengthened partial at the end of the rep. So let's say you're doing a dumbbell bench press. If you start to struggle at the end, you pump out a few from the lengthened position just to about like the halfway point, and you just do a couple lengthened partials. So there's different ways you can kind of obviously challenge it.
And then what type of proxies, or what is your how can you tell if you're doing the right thing? Are your muscles, you can feel, like, how important is the pump feeling versus being sore the next day? How do you kind of rate yourself if you did a good job in the gym or not?
So I mean, it seems like the most common thing is people feel like if they're not sore, they didn't do something right. And that's soreness soreness is an indicator that you might have overdone something a little bit, which kind of
Okay.
triggers that feeling. So it's kind of hard. Once you get a little more advanced, you're not going to get that feeling as much. So I'll have clients that have been training for a long period of time, and they'll be like, my legs don't get very sore anymore. I'm like, that's actually kind of a good thing. that means they're highly
Okay.
trained. And obviously, there's different ways you can kind of challenge them, and they might get a little bit here and there, but it's not really the best way to look at how your workout is. And I don't know if you've seen some research on this too now, but chasing the so-called pump really doesn't
Mhm.
do much for you either. That's not showing any type of progression. So there's always, obviously you want to track things. So obviously if you're getting either maxing out and your max is a lot higher, or you're doing more reps at a certain weights, or if you're looking at body composition, measure by, I got that in-body scan that you've used.
Mhm.
You can use something like that, or just measurements or progress photos, whatever it has to be, something to kind of monitor your progress. Because they can get discouraged if they don't see the certain little thing that they want to see from a progression standpoint. So it's good to have
Right.
kind of different markers to look at to see how you're kind of moving forward. So there's all kinds of different ways you can kind of measure that.
I mean, from that, it makes me feel like you really have to focus on tracking how much you're lifting, how many reps you're doing, and really focus on, doing a little bit more each time to make sure that you're really progressing.
Yeah, and it's tough because obviously not. I'm sure you've done workouts where you're like, man, I just didn't have it today, or some
Hmm.
workouts where you feel phenomenal and you just keep going, you push way more weight. So obviously those are indicators too. So you got to look at just how you feel. Sometimes you didn't get any sleep, or you came off being sick or whatever it is. So it's tough sometimes to kind of monitor. But yes, tracking and kind of documenting things is kind of one of the best ways to do it.
Talk about that for a little bit, like just how important sleep is and why, people kind of overlook that as something that's important in their, goals to lose body fat and build muscle. What is the deal with sleep?
So I'm a very poor example of sleep. Um,
Me too.
I get up early. I start here at 5 every day. I got two kids, and we're lucky to get them in bed and ready to go by 9. So my 8-hour window is already closed at that point.
Yeah.
So I know the importance of it, and it is extremely important for recovery. But a lot of the precedents set out there by a lot of the Instagram influencers, stuff like that, like you have to do this, and you have to, walk after every meal and do all this kind of stuff. Like sometimes it's just not feasible for people. But
Yeah.
I mean, it is extremely important. What I'm working on now for myself, I'm working with one of my former clients who's a nutritionist, and she kind of
Mm,
specializes in this stuff, but is just working on the quality of the sleep that I'm getting versus trying to find ways to make it longer. So
yeah.
more REM sleep, more deep sleep, more restful sleep. So I'm taking a couple different supplements and stuff to kind of help move that along a little bit better. So at least I'm getting better quality sleep, even though it's a shorter period of time. So if someone's not able to get as much, like me, it's just working on the quality of that sleep. Because not necessarily 8 hours, you might get 8 hours and be in bed, but your REM cycle might be all over the place. You might be waking up all the time. So that 8 hours of sleep might not actually be quality either.
Yeah.
But it is extremely important. I mean, for everything, for your cortisol levels, for stress, for everything. It's a big thing and we're all, we're living here. It's everyone's working to death, and you got
I think
you
we
got
live
kids.
in one of the highest concentration of just like busyness. It's all the time busy, like especially if you have kids and a business, you're always running around somewhere and it just doesn't stop until you get them to bed and then it's like a hamster wheel up the next day and but if you go like down south or you're like we're going next week, we're going up to northern Wisconsin. It's just everything is like calm. Like there's not as much craziness. I know I'm on vacation, but still, it's just you get the sense that not everybody's all go go go. But I think in the area that we live in here in Chicago, it's like nonstop all the time. I feel it all the time.
It is, and you got two kids too, right? So,
Three
um,
girls, yeah.
three girls. Okay, so the
Hmm.
activities. Yesterday we had some storms here, and we got them to bed, winding down, and both of them got kind of scared and woke up and at like 10:30. So then we're laying in bed with them till 11. So I didn't get to bed till 11:30. I didn't fall asleep till. So I was
Hmm.
all on pace to get a decent night's sleep, and then obviously life kind of throws you a curveball. So you kind of just got to work with what you got.
Yeah. Um. wh- What have what have you seen? Like this is your job, but I mean, I've seen a lot of benefits with actually working with a personal trainer. and sometimes it's hard for people to really pull the trigger, but why do you think a personal trainer is so important for you to be able to reach your goals? Because I've seen I've seen some of the things that have really worked for me and other places. And I know now you're working with Uncle Dave, which I was so happy. And I think I should get a commission or something, because he was like, how is it so expensive? This is a guy that spends like everything he buys is on sale. And and it's so funny if you know him too. But I'm like, Uncle Dave, what else are you going to spend your money on? You need to focus on your health. This is like the only thing you should be worried about. And he's like, yeah, I know you're right. I know you're right. And now he's stoked about it. We talk about him going to see you and stuff like that. I could not be happier that he is training at all, and specifically with you. I'm just so happy that he's doing that. So I appreciate what you're doing for him. But back to my question, what are the benefits of working with a personal trainer? And if someone's kind of on the fence, how would you kind of tell them, like, look, this is what I've seen and stuff like that?
I mean, it's just kind of getting that blueprint on what you need to get going and kind of the process you need to follow. A lot of people are going in and, we're talking about this now, but like you look at social media and you get information from all these different angles, and sorting that all and trying to figure out what the right way to go can be confusing. And there's a lot of bad information out there. So obviously hiring a coach, you have kind of a specific mindset, a specific direction that you're trying to go. And, obviously not everyone's going to train with me 5 days a week. That's not going to happen. But at least it's a learning thing. It's kind of giving you a schedule and setting up a routine for yourself. So even with, your uncle, he even mentions it. He's like, well, I know that I got these 2 appointments and I know that I'm going to be there, and it gives some accountability just based on that. And safety is another big part of it. People feel more comfortable that they're going to do things properly, then they're not going to get injured, is another big one. For my studio, at least, it's a very private place. So if people are uncomfortable going to the corporate gyms, it's a lot better going into a smaller environment like this as well. Now, when it comes to, a lot of people say, oh, personal trainer should be a motivator and all this type of stuff. And I agree to some degree on that, but if, you've met me, I'm not like a yelling type guy. I'm not in your face. I'm not. So, I mean, I'll stand over people, and I guess that can be sort of intimidating or motivational in a way. But what I always tell people is it's getting that building blocks to what you need to go down the road. So obviously teaching you what you need to do, getting you set up with a routine and a schedule, and helping you progress from there. And then eventually you shouldn't need me anymore. Hopefully I teach that person enough to where they're comfortable going to do that on their own. Now that doesn't always happen, but that's the ultimate goal with a trainer, is obviously giving you all the tools and everything you need to succeed.
I think a big part of it is the accountability for me, and my mindset too, is just like knowing that you're gonna show up, or whatever your setup is with your trainer or coach is, either you're logging and they're gonna check in with you and to see if you're actually recording the macronutrients that you agreed upon, or the progress with your weight, or whatever it is. It could be more focused on weight training and making sure you're doing that, 4 days a week or whatever the case may be. But the accountability is a big one. Like, I'll do stuff more because other people are watching or going to be a part of that than just for myself, So I really like the accountability of having a trainer for sure.
And a lot of it is kind of that added push on top of it. So I've had a couple clients in there, they'll even tell me like, hey, luckily they'll text me and ask me what weight we use for a certain exercise, but 9 times out of 10, they're picking a weight that's significantly less than what I would normally give them. So when they come here, like obviously I'm determining what they're doing, so that added push is going to be there, versus kind of like backing it off a little bit. So the intensity is there a little bit more too. So a lot of people, I have some that come in just once a week just to, I don't want to put it this way, but I guess I will, is just to get their ass kicked. Like they want added push to kind of get a feel for what they're supposed to be doing.
And I was actually going to answer that question. So you could do like 1 day a week with you, and just to kind of like reset you, make sure you're on the same track, and then like the other, however many days you're working out, you just go and do the rest of your program. But every Tuesday or however you set it up, I'm with Joe. I'm going to make sure that I'm there. I'm going to have the right form. He's going to set me up for the rest of my week of training, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's always easier for me to kind of dictate some things and see kind of how the exercises are going, if they have any complications or if they're compensating in a certain way on a certain exercise. So that hands-on approach is always more beneficial. So, and then I can map out something as like an online type program, which I think you and I did for a little while
Yeah.
in the very beginning there, where
Mm-hmm.
obviously it's gonna show you what to do and a rep range and stuff like that. But I can't tell you I can't see how hard you're working on your own.
Right.
So that's kind of the tough part is um, I'll push everyone in here, but what they do outside of here is kind of up to them. So obviously you hope that they kind of push the limit a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I've had clients for a while that started way back when and did 2 or 3 days a week, and then they backed it off and went down a day or 2 days. So I've had clients that were 3 days a week and then came down to one just as like a check-in phase. Um, Come in, maybe some different stuff. I do a lot of I go to a lot of seminars and stuff too, so I like to learn some new stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
that I'll incorporate some of that and kind of show them the new things that I learn and kind of just go from there.
That's what I think is cool about your space is like you're always getting different equipment in and you're doing stuff that I don't see any other place and on your stories and on your posts and stuff like that. It's very cool to me to see like you're like staying on top of it and you're motivated to make sure, you're offering your clients, great equipment and great training and service. So it seems like awesome to me.
Yeah, I just
Um,
got a hip rotation one here just last week, so or 2 weeks ago. So I keep kind of recycling different things, see what people
yeah,
like.
that's awesome. Um, let's talk a little bit about cardio. Why? What is your thought process on cardio? I know that um, in my case, I'm abuse it. I do it too much in my opinion. But it's something that I like. I enjoy doing. I feel like I'm getting a good workout in when I do the Stairmaster. Like, my trainer is trying to get me to back off of it and more control my calories than trying to like overcompensate with cardio. How do you think about that?
I mean, cardio's got a laundry list of benefits to it. Obviously, your heart
Mm-hmm.
is the most important muscle in your body, essentially. So, doing more cardio will help improve your weight training as well.
Mm,
So there's a lot of added benefits to it. And again, it comes back to kind of if we're looking at like an adherence type factor, is what you like to do. I
right.
hate cardio. I try and do it here and there, but I despise it. I just don't like doing it. Unless I'm playing sports or something, like I'm not one to just go run on the treadmill or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I know the benefits of it, and obviously it can help. It's not a lot of literature for a while was saying how cardio burns muscle and all this type stuff, and that's just not true. Obviously,
That's good to hear.
you want to incorporate both together. So as
Yeah.
long as you're doing the weight training side as well, that's not going to happen. But yeah, I mean, there's tons of benefits to cardio. It's just picking which one you like to do and what makes you in a routine of doing it.
Um, so you're obviously very fit and you've spent time, building muscle and stuff like that. Where are you at in your personal fitness goals and health goals and stuff like that? I know you did kind of a longer post than you usually do, kind of explaining some of your blood markers and stuff. If you don't mind talking about it, I know it's a little personal, but just it's interesting to me that someone, I was going to lead this off with this is like, if I had to go way back in time, and make a decision on a career route, I think that if I know what I know now, I would go into doing something like you're doing in the personal fitness space because I think it's so interesting to be able to help people and you're also, helping yourself. You're in the fitness industry. Obviously, I think it's like pays off to be in shape like you are because then the clients are going to trust you. It's really hard to take advice for some big dude sitting on his you know what, and trying to tell you how to lift weights or how to stay in shape. And, you know, you live it and you breathe it, and it shows for sure. So when you're at your level, what are the types of things you're focused on and working on?
So for me now, I mean, I'm not training for anything specifically. If anything, I'd
Hmm.
say I'm just in a maintenance type thing. Um, and you know, I just talked about how I kind of travel around, go to these different seminars, mess with some different systems. So a lot of it is just kind of what rabbit hole I'm kind of going down. So it's more just educating myself and trying that stuff out in those programs. So for like a 2 year stretch, I went down the functional range systems route, which is the mobility stuff. So I went through their whole program. I did their functional range conditioning. I did kin stretch. I did the internal strength model. Um, so for a while there, it was just testing out all their stuff and seeing how it benefits from a strength perspective and mobility, range of motion, etc. And then last year I went into Colorado. I did this N1 seminar, which is all, it was a biomechanics seminar, working on different lines of tissue and all this and different exercises. And so then I kind of went down that rabbit hole and I focused on kind of their program, their exercises, and their structure. So, I mean, obviously I've maintained, I have gotten stronger, so a lot of it has benefited. But
Hmm.
I don't have a specific goal that I'm working towards at this time, just because it's more about being at home with the kids, managing the business, and just kind of sneaking it in when I can here and there. Um,
Hmm.
but
I
yeah,
mean,
so
you
that's
do
kind of,
look like when I see your content, it does look like you're purposely trying to get stronger or build muscle. But if that's not the case, I'm surprised.
I mean, I definitely push it. I'm definitely going for it, but I'm not
Yeah,
like, you know, it's not like I need to get my bench to this or I need to get my squat to this or
yeah,
whatever it is.
I guess that makes sense.
But yeah, and then going to your other question about the kind of the post that I had. So obviously, you know, I'm getting a little older. My wife's been on me about getting physicals for a long time. I finally did it like a year ago,
Hmm.
um, and did some blood work and stuff. And at the time, it said I had high LDLs. So everything else was pretty good. It showed that I was a little dehydrated, and I am kind of poor at drinking water and using electrolytes and
Hmm.
stuff like that. So that same nutritionist I mentioned earlier, I sent her my blood work. This was a couple months ago, and you know they wanted to put me on statins and stuff like this. And I'm like, I don't want
Oh
to do that.
no.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't want to do that. What methods can we do in order to try and bring this down a little bit? So she's got me on like a heavy supplement regimen now. I got to actually go retest in about a week or two here, and kind of see how everything's kind of progressed. But so some fish oils, some vitamin E, some supplements. I don't even know what they are, but I'm just taking her advice on it.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I spoke to my dad about it, and LDLs run really high in my family. So
Hmm.
my sister also. I don't want to throw her under the bus on here, but it was funny because when I got my results, she got hers like a day later. We didn't even coordinate it, and her LDLs were
Oh.
really high.
So where I'm interested in getting my blood work done and something like, and trying to figure out where I'm at, because I have a suspicion, you know, my cholesterol might be high too. Where did you go, and what do you suggest doing the process for all that?
I just went to my a general doctor.
Okay.
I didn't really have one at the time, so the practice that my wife goes to, they had a doctor there that was recommended to me, so I just went to him.
Do
And
you have to ask for a certain panel or something like that, or do they know what to to look for?
I mean, usually they're going off of what your general insurance is going to like cover. So, and
Okay.
usually it's going to be, you know, your fasting glucose stuff, your cholesterol, and all those different factors, red blood count, white blood cell count, all those different things. If you want additional, so I asked for a vitamin D test on top of it because I was curious where
Mm-hmm.
I was at for that. They might
Mm-hmm.
charge an additional thing or whatever. They could pretty much put whatever you want on there. You just might have to pay extra based on what your insurance covers. But they had
Okay.
everything. I talked to my client first. She's like, I want to see this, this, and this on the blood test, and all the stuff that she needed was on there. So I submitted that to her right after, and then we kind of went from there. And she, you know, me and her have been checking in every couple days or so about what I'm doing, nutrition wise, supplement wise, etc.
And you use like some of the stuff I've seen. You have some sort of meal prep company that you like to use, and is that based on do they do it based on macros, calories as a whole, or what type of markers are you looking for when you're having those meals?
So he does it. I think you can customize through his website as well. You can request like certain macros and stuff. Basically, what I do is I usually eat about two of them a day from him, and then I kind of fill in the gaps where I need. So
Hmm.
usually I'll try and pick the highest protein one, and then like let's say two of his meals are 90 grams of protein total. I'm going for about 225 a day. So I'll obviously dinner I'll probably have about 50, and then I'll have a shake somewhere to cover about 50, and I'll just kind of
Hmm.
fill in the gaps where I need on top of his meal. So if anything, it's just making it very his meals make it very convenient for me at work. They're pre-made. I just pop it in the microwave, eat it between clients or whenever I have a break. Um, so it just saves me a lot of time. So
Yeah,
obviously time is hard to come by. So it
for sure.
it's really good meals. They're very well balanced. He's always got a vegetable source in there, some kind of carb, protein, etc. So it's worked out pretty well for me.
Um, we talked about this a little bit already, but I just wanted to go over it one more time because I think it's so important. Is energy balance and weight management. Um, is it really as simple as calories in as versus calories out, or is there anything else people have to really consider if they're looking to lose weight? And what are some of the talk a little bit about, losing water weight versus fat and stuff like that.
So the calories in, calories out is what it seems, except there's a couple factors that people don't really look at. So you
Okay.
can't just go based off of how many calories you burned and how many calories you eat.
Mm-hmm.
Because you got basically when you have a total daily expenditure that they go through, the TDEE, you're looking at whatever your BMR is, which is going to be what your body burns just basically laying in a bed all day, not doing anything. And then you have your exercise activity, so that's what you're going to burn during exercise. You have your NEAT, which is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So that's what let's say you're just walking around for work or you're walking around your kitchen, whatever it is, that's going to be factored into that. And then you have your thermic effect of food. So certain foods like protein, for example, is going to be a lot harder for the body to break down. So it takes more energy to break it down. So it's going to burn more calories. So when people look at calories in, calories out, they're forgetting about those other three numbers, and they're just looking at it almost what their BMR is going to be or what their exercise is.
Okay.
So you got to kind of take all that into account. So someone who's much more active at work, their number is going to be a little bit different than someone that's sitting in an office job all day.
Right.
You kind of have to factor things out based on a couple different numbers that you're taking in. And then when you're coming to like the water weight stuff, so if let's say you go out to dinner, you have obviously a lot of meals at restaurants are going to be very high in salt. So your weight can fluctuate very significantly on those days because you're going to retain a lot more water because of the salt intake. So now when I'm trying to measure clients for weight, the old school thing a lot of people would say is don't weigh yourself every day because mentally it might mess with you.
Mm-hmm.
What I do is have people weigh themselves 7 days a week, and you take a weekly average
Right.
because you're going to
That's
see
the
that
program
weight
I'm in.
go like this based on your
Mm-hmm.
water. And women especially, they're going to fluctuate even more on water. So it's very important to kind of get an average. And obviously, like if you weigh yourself on Monday one week and Thursday the next week, it could be drastically different between the two just based on different factors.
Yeah.
So
I
I think
think that's important too, is to take the weight at the same time every day, and then get an average for the week. And I definitely think, because I see it, because I do it and I see the weight fluctuate. I went out to dinner at for Dave's 70th birthday. His birthday's this week actually coming up, but we took him out to dinner because we're going to be out of town next week. And after I did that dinner, my weight was 189, and then 2 days later I was back down to 185. And it's just because your body just holds on to so much water, like you're saying. And that's one thing that I find can be very discouraging, and why people kind of like get off their programs like, oh, I just gained 4 pounds. Well, you didn't actually gain 4 pounds of tissue. You just held on to so much water because you were dipping your bites of steak in a salt cup,
Exactly.
and people don't know or realize that can get so discouraged, and that can knock them off their whole program.
And I always try and like almost just lay it out for them and be like, did you overeat by, so let's say it was 4 pounds, did you overeat by 14,000 calories?
I
And
hope not.
they're like, well, no. I'm like, well, it's 3,500 calories in a pound. You didn't gain 4 pounds
Yeah.
because it's exactly what you said, the water section. And that's the thing with like the keto diet too, is a lot of people are like, well, I dropped 20 pounds. Okay, well, how much of that was water? Because you're restricting carbs, which makes you hold more water. So a lot of that is just water loss. So it's
Um,
important to follow that along.
because now we're on the water program. Talk about, and this is something that is, as you know, the most researched thing in sports science. The most researched supplement is creatine. Talk a little bit about what your thoughts on creatine are, why it's important, why you may or may not suggest it to people.
So I think it's the best supplement you can get. It's the cheapest. It's
Mm-hmm.
probably the easiest to find. Obviously, almost every supplement brand is going to have it. Um, and there's no ill effects from it. So going back to the water, like a lot of people think you get bloated or you put on water weight from creatine, and that's not what happens. It's intercellular water, so it's getting pushed into the muscle cell. It's not getting,
Mm-hmm.
strained in your stomach or something like that. So it's not making you bloated.
Mm-hmm.
And even going outside the fitness spaces, so obviously creatine is going to help you with muscle size, muscle strength, endurance, and even going outside of fitness, it's starting to show a lot of research that it helps with depression and stuff with the brain as well.
Wow.
So, and there's no negatives. And I will say that you got a lot of supplement companies trying to trick people into saying that you have creatine nitrate and some of these other forms that people are trying to sell now for like triple the price. And
Mm-hmm.
creatine monohydrate 100% saturates the cell. You don't need a different form. So that's just a
Right.
money grab by a lot of these companies. But even females ask me all the time, like, should I be taking creatine or can I? Absolutely. If you're trying to lose weight, absolutely. If you're trying to get stronger, take it. There's really there's no bad aspect of creatine.
And does it matter, in your opinion, like when you take it? Like, could you mix it with your pre-workout, or would you take it with breakfast or dinner, or does it really matter?
Whenever you can take it consistently, that's really all that
Okay.
matters. So
Yeah.
if it's first thing in the morning in your protein shake, if you're taking one, or if you take a protein shake or something after, whenever you can just get that in every day is all that matters.
Okay. That's cool. Um, last question. What are some tips like for keeping, as a coach and a trainer, keeping people motivated and, getting staying on program basically? Is there anything that you've seen that is, a tried and true method that you can talk to clients and be like, all right, this guy's in the mode, he wants to keep going, you want to see progress? I mean, I'm sure you've seen people succeed and fail, like in your line, like many people, like a lot of times the way I think about it is like people don't have problem really losing weight. It's kind of like the maintenance period after losing weight. People are pretty good actually at losing some pounds, but then it's like staying on that track for the long term. So, is there anything that you've learned over the years to help people stay positive in the right mindset and see success?
It's hard when you stop seeing people. Like I always check in with clients that, have stopped training or whatever it is and make sure they're kind of still staying diligent in what they need to do. Obviously, there's a lot of factors out of control and life happens and people lose a job or they lose a loved one or whatever it is and they
Mm-hmm.
can spiral. I mean, there's so many different things that play into it. So for me, the biggest thing is just kind of teaching them the right way to kind of manage. And let's be real, majority of the time it's the food. Um, People dive into food, and that's their coping mechanism and different things. And they go out a little bit more. They celebrate that they've lost all this weight and everything else, and it kind of slowly creeps back. And
Yeah.
it's tough because like and as much as I hate to say this, it's not really there's not much I can do about it besides giving
Mm-hmm.
them the tools of kind of how to make those things kind of fit into what they need from a diet perspective. And obviously, I'll bug them about make sure they get to the gym and stuff like that. But the nutrition side is where everyone kind of falters a little bit. So when I'm working with
Yeah.
people, I do a lot with like flexible dieting
Mm-hmm.
and being like, all right, you went out to eat, you said. So if I had someone going out to eat to dinner, be like, all right, stick to protein throughout the course of the day, save some of your calories for nighttime, and try and make that dinner fit within what you need for your calorie perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So just teaching little tricks and stuff like that to kind of help. Obviously, it doesn't always work, but from my perspective, it's just trying to give the right tools and the right mindset to get them to kind of think about those things when this kind of stuff starts to happen. But
Right.
unfortunately, life shit happens, and you kind of just move along from there. There's
Right.
not much you can do.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think that was really good. Hopefully, people got some value out of that. That's not what we usually talk about on the podcast, but hopefully, I helped my own in the fitness space and people got some value out of it. We always like to finish up with the lightning round, so I got like a list of 10 different things. You're just gonna give me your quick response to each one. You ready?
All right. Well, all right.
All right, number one, favorite pizza.
Ooh, that's a tough one. Let's just say Lou Malnati's.
Best bicep exercise for a pump.
Preacher curls.
Favorite online fitness influencer or personality.
Alan Aragon.
Top pick for shoes, like training shoes.
Vivo Barefoot is my go-to.
Okay. Favorite pre-workout supplement.
Ghost.
Most effective mobility exercise.
Cars.
Well,
Should I
I don't
explain
know
what
what
that
that is.
is?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of the starting point for the mobility stuff. It's controlled articular rotation, so taking each joint through a full range of motion that's pain-free. It's kind of a routine that we set up for everybody in the beginning.
Sounds essential. Um, most effective. Oh, we did that one. Preferred time of day for working out for you.
I like early morning if I can do it.
Yeah, me too. Favorite post-workout meal.
That's a good one. Poke Bowl.
Favorite fitness or nutrition book.
I would say probably Super Training.
Who's that by? Super Training.
So I think I have a copy of it here, actually. This is like the Bible of strength training.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
So anyone in the field will know what this one is. Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Mel Sif is the main one, or the second one, and then Yuri, I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Last one. Top motivational quote.
Man, I'm not a quote guy. Let's see, I have one on my wall over here. You can have results or excuses, not both.
That's good.
It's an Arnold quote.
That is good. Joe, thank you so much for taking the time, man. And thank you for everything you're doing for Uncle Dave. I really appreciate it. I'm so glad he's following through with it. And I think there's nothing much that could be better for him. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. He's doing well, so he seems to like it too. So that's always a huge thing.
Yeah, that's good. That's very good. Hopefully he stays on track. Awesome. Well, if people are interested, where can they find you? Where's your gym? What's your Instagram handle? That stuff.
Instagram's JA Moca Fit, and my gym's located Northwest Burbs in Palatine, Illinois. I also got a website, mocafit.com.
Sweet. All right, guys, if you want to get fit, go see Joe. We'll talk to you soon, Joe. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks for having me.
All right, bye.